Welcome, welcome. On behalf of Beyond Baroque Literary Arts Center, I'd like to welcome you all to the Wanda Coleman Theater and to the launch, yes, of Without Consent of the People by Fred Dewey. Yes. I know it's taken a lot of work to get to this place, so we're really excited to share with you tonight. My name is Jimmy Vega. I'm the Executive Director of Beyond Baroque. I'd like to thank you. I'd like to start by acknowledging Beyond Baroque's presence on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Tonga peoples. We acknowledge the wrong done to these peoples through settler colonialism, genocidal practices, and the violent disposition of their land. And as an arts organization, we are committed to uplifting indigenous communities, their stories, and cultures. For those who don't know, Beyond Baroque is Los Angeles' oldest literary arts center, located here in Venice, California. Founded in 1968 by George Drury Smith, first as an experimental literary magazine before reimagining itself and becoming the literary home we know it as today. We are based here out of the original Venice City Hall and help support writers and help cultivate new writing through our extensive program of writing workshops, readings, and performances. We offer a number of workshops online via Zoom, such as our free weekly Monday Night Fiction workshop, facilitated by Raquel Baker, and our historic Wednesday night poetry workshop, currently facilitated by Martin Yago. This past April, we were celebrating National Poetry Month, and we celebrated our infamous 30 and 30 workshop with Brendan Constantine, and that was great, with more workshops slated for the remaining of the year. And aside from our workshops, we host over 100 programs in this theater, which is, thank you. It's something I know Fred knew a lot of, in kind of hosting programs week to week here in the space. This spring, in about a week, we're going to be celebrating a special poetry and wine tasting fundraiser featuring the talents of Muriel Leong, Stephen Rains, Cody Cisco, Eduardo Martinez Leiva, and Mandy Khan, paired with wines by Sochi Wines, Paco Wines, and Eastside Love. So if you are inclined to come back, we're going to be celebrating some poetry. We're going to do a little wine tasting out here in the garden. It's going to be a lot of fun. Tickets for that are on sale right now on our website. And for more on all of that, please do visit beyondbaroque.org or at BB Lit Arts on our socials. Right now, you walked into the lobby, you can see some art from the artist J.I. Judy Kleinberg. The exhibition is titled The Poem, My Trembling Candle. And if you follow upstairs in the Mike Kelly Gallery, you'll see some more of that art. The closing is going to be happening in a couple of days. So I do welcome you to check that out before you leave tonight. Lastly, we offer memberships to Beyond Baroque starting at $75. A membership goes a long way here. It helps us support what we do, week in and week out. Since 1968, Beyond Baroque has nurtured generations of Los Angeles poets, writers, artists, thinkers, and we can't do that without your generosity and your support. So thank you. Thank you to John Dewey for being here with us and for, helping gathering all of us for Fred. And thank you for, Renee Petropoulos for all of her work and, getting the Fred Dewey Legacy Project always on board and, continuing to do their table reads, etc. And with that, I think I want to bring up Renee Petropoulos.
Okay, and I'm wearing a shirt designed by Nina Salerno, but I think it dovetails with Fred's sentiments and the title of the book. I'm here as a representative of the Fred Rogers Dewey Legacy Project, which is a group of friends who got together to, grieve Fred and also to keep the work alive and afloat. And John Dewey, Fred's brother, has really helped us in that regard, as have many others who have contributed to the writers that have been in residence at Fred's house. One of the early residents suggested we make a film. And so our small group got it together to commission Dana Duff to make a film based on a book of Fred's, a last chapter, actually, I Do Not Consent. We keep going, and I'm running the Hannah Arendt table reading working group, and that meets once a month on a Saturday, and there's a strong group of people that show up over and over and talk about ideas and where we are today and the work of Arendt, who is very dear in thinking to Fred. So with that, this evening, getting this book published was the other project of the Fred Rogers Dewey Legacy Project. And this was initiated before Fred passed away by Brooks Rodden, who is one of our small group band of people. And Brooks, through the help of a few other members, including Sue Spade, discovered that Fred had kept the manuscript that he was working on his laptop. And we were able to rescue it there, and through the work of both Sue Spade and Jeremiah Day, massage it into this book that you see today. So this is basically a launch to get the book out there in the world. We're sorry Brooks can't be here. He's traveling from Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, one of those states, back to LA now, but he didn't make it in time to be here. But I know in spirit he is, and the book is really a fabulous document of Fred's apartment as well. So when you crack it open and you see all of these bookshelves and all of that, that's where Fred lived and where he kept everything. I mean, everything. So when you go through it, you'll see photographs that the Legacy Project had commissioned a photographer to go in and look at it or photograph it for us. All right, so without that further ado, the readers. I don't know if I should list everyone all at once and just let you guys come up. We're a kind of familial group here, I think. I'm going to start, though, with Sue Spade. She wrote the afterword, and we're going to start with the afterword. Well, mainly because she has a flight out today or tonight, and we don't want to make her nervous or uncomfortable. And Sue, as I said, is one of the editors. Sue was a dear, dear friend of Fred's for many years. She knew much of his family, traveled to the various homes of relatives, and was a gallery owner in her own right. She's a brilliant philosopher. And here's Sue.
Okay, thank you so much for that introduction. That was lovely. I want to tell you that the way I met Fred was that I had a gallery, and one of his previous girlfriends thought that we should get fixed up. So my first experience with Fred is him coming over, checking me out. I'm checking him out. We decided we were great friends, but it never went more than that. But it was a great life experience. He ended up being the best man at our wedding, so I think it was a good checkout. We checked each other out, and it worked out really well. Okay, so I'm going to read the afterword, which I'm not going to read the page numbers, but being a philosopher, we always like to reference everything. So I thought it'd be really fun. So once the book was done, I could reference all the points I was making in the book. So if you have the book, you'll see the reference numbers, but I'm not going to read them because it's a little tedious. And at least my after will give you a teaser of the whole book, because that's what the afterword is. Let's see, where am I? Okay, 2:15. All right, so shifting between imaginative nonfiction and creative nonfiction, how without the consent of the people rekindles consent. So I begin with a quote of Fred's. The most important fact of all has been rendered invisible, that the root of power lies in the people, and that the people know best what is wrong and would, in due time, due course, and through assembly and debate, know how to correct and repair, were they ever given the chance. In 2021, our dear friend Fred left us a tall order. 5 years later, it's clear that he meant to sound an alarm regarding the significance of consent and how easily it could disappear, along with a general disregard for extant laws and a neglect of the public will. As per usual, Fred had his finger on the pulse. Without the consent of the people, Fred's semi-autobiographical, brutal takedown of 21st century American society implores us to deploy people power to imaginatively mend a broken republic besieged by pervasive mendacity. He considers the same question, what about the people, to drive both School of Public Life, his previous book, and Without the Consent of the People. The first book addressed the people, while the latter book scrutinizes about, thus clarifying the conditions necessary to secure the principles and reality of a free, rich, shared world of life together in truth, dignity, and political freedom. Such is the irresistible nature of truth, that all it asks and all it wants is the liberty of appearing. Without consent, Fred poses a riddle. We face a final problem. If this is our government, as we tell ourselves it is, how can we not trust what it says, or what we have indeed authorized all that it does in our name? To answer this, he interrogates the ruling caste, mentioned 151 times in the original draft and 82 times in the final manuscript, which conjoins force and fiction. In short, Without Consent proffers a master plan for identifying and restoring what matters in order to reconstruct our public. If met with silence, or as Stephen Colbert's right-wing alter ego recently rewrote our national motto, "In God We Hush," that was last year when I wrote that, the tyranny of political and economic cartels and their caste society will achieve mind-ending, thus validating deceitful ploys, whether alternative facts, fake news, and even the truth, in order to perpetuate a mean-spirited, however awe-inspiring, shock and awe, forever violence. Unfortunately, by reading it to you guys, you don't see all the quotes, but most of this is me quoting Fred from previous pages. Rather than focusing on manufactured consent, as do Noam Chomsky and his ilk, Fred credits the caste society with manufacturing reality. He notes, contrary to the claim of a few writers and intellectuals, consent cannot be made up or fabricated or manufactured. If it is, it obviously is not consent. It is propaganda, organization, force, violence, and domination by the lie. And that is what we have in America, a society of the lie, and no longer a society of consent. Governing consent has been replaced by governing lie. These days, consent is denied and the public will is ignored. And then I tell the story about UC Berkeley recently notified Judith Butler that their name is included on a list of 160 anti-Semitic faculty submitted by the university to the DOE. Butler likens this accusation by notification scheme to Kafka's character in the trial, who fails to glean any information regarding whatever crime warrants his arrest and prosecution. So those are familiar with Isabel Wilkerson's book, Caste, The Origins of Discontents, that's from 2020, and her efforts to frame the new construction era in America may notice parallels between Fred's ideas and hers. Yet he cites only her August 1st, 2020 Guardian article. I don't know how well he knew her work, but I can attest that he had already developed his caste concept when her book dropped. During his July 2, 2020 Solidarity Hall interview, I was extremely active in the chat room with other Zoomers who kept referring to class, which struck me as irrelevant for Fred's approach. When I emailed Fred the next day, he identified the problem as caste and not class. I thus imagine him feeling quite vindicated a month later when Wilkerson's Caste, her book, gave verve to his novel view. But hers ignores deceit. One of Without Consent's best lines is, "Those who say consent can be manufactured are Pied Pipers of the pretzel." I don't know what it means, but it's a great line. And no doubt he felt vindicated when a young Gilets jaunes demanded his community establish neighborhood councils. The reader will no doubt recognize the criminality Fred associates with chronic cruelty, corruption, contradictions, barriers to freedoms, a ruling caste, and the warping of our perception of reality. As he plainly lays out, we never consented to the many laws, strategies, and systems that demean and distort justice, fairness, legitimacy, and democracy, thus rendering our fragile republic moot. In admitting responsibility for every kind of wrongdoing, including those preceding his existence by centuries, Fred, following James Baldwin, sets an example for us all in taking responsibility for 44 situations to which he never consented. I counted them. He reminds us that we can't correct criminalities unless we accept responsibilities for their continuance. In declining responsibility, we justify our ignoring such sordid tales. But we remain accomplices all the same. Fred beseeches us to be vigilant regarding propaganda, the ultimate racket. He continues, propaganda is not precisely force, but is certainly a lie and so a violation. Its very premise is to violate truth, not as the original meaning might have been thought to be, but to broadcast it. He warns us that the media and press are now effectively controlled by a ruling caste, creating propaganda and nefarious as under any dictatorship. Initially, I worried that Fred's manifesto, a clarion call to revolution if there ever was one, the word revolution appears 50 times, risks inspiring the wrong people, that is, those with legitimate gripes who consider violence the most efficient tool for change, or even worse, those teeming with white madness for whom the Republic itself is the enemy, since democracy's redistributive tactics threaten their security. Early on, Fred points out that white madness and the BLM movement actually share similar foundations, or lack thereof. There is no security because of the widespread destruction of the first principle of a democratic republic, that self-government is the only source of security for the people. The draft featured an essay penned no less by Eamon Bundy of the 2016 Malheur National Wildlife Refuge occupation, which totally echoes the streams of thought pervading without consent in order to generate debate. In contrast to those who blame their plight on some globalist cabal, the word cabal appears nowhere in Without Consent, this book urges readers to dismantle the ruling caste democratically. Luckily for us, he has diligently enumerated 183 dissimulations and miracles, enabling us to distinguish oppressive forces requiring neutralization from invaluable matter in need of protection. In sum, here's a quote from Fred, the overarching need to rebuild the republic amongst ourselves is all we have to assure peace and security. The people's right to self-government, to truth, justice, democracy, dignity, and decency is inviolable. Fred frames America as an empire. Quote, America has become a super productive society for the military and for finance, not widespread wealth, and increasingly it's the rest be damned. The form is empire, and the blowback from empire is to further amplify these two intertwined forms. The result is increasingly visible as we see now on our city streets, raw domination. Fred repeatedly attributes our current situation to two seminal events. One, the anti-democratic Confederacy, which legitimized a Slavocracy glued together by violence and power in the hands of a few. And two, Missouri Senator Harry Truman's edging out Vice President Henry Wallace to become FDR's VP pick, which gave rise to the Truman Doctrine that effectively exported the U.S. military across the globe in order to contain communism. Fast forward to the present. It is an irony of history that the structure built to prevent conditions of existing under imperial rule has been reshaped and corroded, so we face not a foreign occupier spying on everyone, extracting wealth, wrecking our communities, and misrepresenting us, but our very own all-American apple pie usurpers. Expanding upon his earlier notion of empire, Fred adds, one does not have to go very far to see an empire of rackets as the great gear. Empire of Rackets, by the way, was a working title for quite some time. But anyway, okay. To see an empire of rackets as the great gear, protected by an idolatrous and devastating thing, elevated in a governing principle, national security. All right, I think I'm going to try to go ahead here. All right. So this book is timely, indeed. Had it been published a few years earlier as originally planned, I wonder whether we might have had the foresight to derail recent events, such as the U.S. Supreme Court's counter-constitutional activities, hijacked as they've been by the Federalist Society and the Heritage Foundation's Project 2025, the FBI seizures of the oligarchs, properties whose sudden claims to ill-begotten gains belie the IRS's earlier tolerance approval of said purchases, or the multi-year delay of Philip Guston's survey amidst museological concerns that his Klan imagery might prove too painful in light of ongoing racial justice campaigns. Fred considered Guston's paintings exemplary of his constantly asking himself, am I evil? Okay, so finally, adding fuel to Fred's fire, The Simpsons 2022 season finale tendered a musical that sounds like a page torn from Without Consent, yet it found inspiration in Danny Alexis Ricecomp's Atlantic article, The Life in The Simpsons is No Longer Obtainable. With help from Hugh Jackman and Robert Reich in a musical format, the season finale ripped Fox News, Tucker Carlson, and Facebook. I imagine the legion of workers at Amazon and Starbucks strategizing ways to unionize rather than hiring professional union representatives to bargain for them would make Fred's day. Since the 80s, he'd been advocating bottom-up versus top-down unions. Even the media seems in agreement. Fred would be delighted to learn that the 2022 documentary George Carlin's American Dream focused on this comedian's political insight. Fred likely winked when President Bush decried one man's decision to launch a wholly unjustified and brutal invasion of Ukraine, Iraq too. Remember when Bush got it all confused? What's more, Lynn Cheney's 2022 acceptance speech for the John F. Kennedy Profiles in Courage Award echoes Fred's rant to a T, demonstrating this text's bipartisan appeal. And this is what she said. I ask all of you to remember this sacred duty that is passed to us, to remember that in our republic, some things have to matter. Fred has an entire chapter called Things Having to Matter. The defense of our public, the defense of the constitutional foundations of our nation have to matter. In a republic, there are no bystanders, there are no spectators. As citizens, every one of us has a duty to set aside partisan battles and stand together to perpetuate and preserve our great republic. When I first penned this, I didn't yet agree with Fred that our government is a rigged system that's been hijacked by elected and appointed government officials who don't care a whit about voters. 4 years later, I'm blown away by Fred's prescience. Stranger still, only the dead, this is an important point, only the dead are free to convey such truth that warrant immediate attention without having to worry about swatting, cyberbullying, getting doxxed, or public defamation. And I have to say, in my opinion, this is the strength of this text, is that Fred is free. He can make the claims and doesn't have to worry about any of that. Either way, I hardly agree that the people owe it to themselves and their children to take back the government from politicians who are in so deep that they cannot seem to step away, let alone pass the baton to the next generation. Obviously, we need to repeal Citizens United, set term limits, and secure voters' rights. Some may wish that Fred had completed more of Without Consent than he did. Incomplete as it is, I hardly concur with Brooks Rodin's decision to publish it more or less come escrito, that's conductor jargon for as it is written, since it sheds lights on Fred's thinking, making it a book about his writing process as much as it's about the conditions required for a democratic republic. Fred considered thinking itself an event, so this book is an event meant to spark us to act. Moreover, Fred cherished truth and dignity, so it hardly made sense to clean it up or render it ready for prime time. Fred's master plan is grounded in what he termed imaginative fiction, the literary form that he had been developing these past few years. This form found inspiration in Hannah Arendt's having emphasized the imagination's role in dispelling the surfeit of fictions that arose to confuse the populace. Such lies not only freeze us, thus sowing in action, but they exploit our desires, flame our fears, and spawn divisions in order to weaken our republic. Fred's fiercely dystopic text doubles as creative nonfiction. Ever the fair-minded anthologist, he wields lines from online blogs, news stories, and investigative journalism to paint a portrait as honest as possible of we, the people. A super sick patient suffering massive inflammation. Uncle Sam appears totally bloated, puffed up, and stretched beyond recognition. In bearing witness to our illness, without consent rekindles our will to survive, while rousing our desire to thrive. A cure is proffered, but rehabilitation requires taking his diagnosis to heart. Without consent implores us to douse the fire now. One calls the PSA, don't get under a rock, get into action. Anyway, I don't think I need to read anymore. I read a lot, so thank you very much. There's more to go, but...
Thank you, Sue. I'm going to invite Dana Duff up now because she was reading from a section about lies, and it seems appropriate to follow Sue's afterword with a section on lies.
I'm so happy to have Fred's new book, and I'm so happy to read it because thanks to Renee and Sue and Jeremiah in particular, I had the opportunity to become really acquainted with Fred's writing by filming 34 people reading kind of over and over again, and I love Fred's words. I love the way Fred writes. It's kind of like, you'll hear, it's like nursery rhymes. Really, really simple and musical. And he often states the obvious in a really pointed way and in a repetitious way that I just love. Okay, I'm going to read from On the Infinite Lie. It starts with a couple of epigraphs. There's never a price to pay when you lie for the establishment. Jimmy Dore, from The Jimmy Dore Show, December 29, 2018. The way America works today, in order for a person to have a sterling reputation, a person has to lie and support the ruling ideology and official explanations. That's Paul Craig Roberts in Truth Tellers Are Being Censored by Paul Craig Roberts Institute for Political Economy, March 4th, 2019. A lie is distinguished by a quality or feature that seldom gets attention. A lie and liars are treated as a moral problem, as if somehow identifying a lie or liars can bend things back to their just and right order. The problem is, a lie does something both obvious but also imperceptible to the world, and in particular, its shared aspect. While obviously some sort of moral affront, the lie is important because it actually seeks to change things. It is a kind of action. We are not necessarily the ones who seek that change, but liars do. A lie is an attempt to change things by proposing something that is not so in order to make it so. A lie is the most powerful thing after truth. The lie recognizes the central component of action, which is to step into the flow of things and alter it. Lies are all about changing that flow, changing what the world is, for others, for oneself, in the form of deception, self-deception, the internalized lie, and so on. To lie about people and things is to seek to make them what they are not. But the problem and the evil in it is that at its core, this impulse and capacity is to eliminate what is so. This is the horror of things like genocide. Yet genocide's fundamental link to lying, in its core violence, is seldom explored. It is central. For in its mass murder, it is the elimination of all crucial vantages to know what is so. Mass murder murders the world and thrusts things into unreality, such that reality itself cannot be retrieved because it takes multiple perspectives to grasp it. One frightening truth is that to preserve the system and its corruption, many Americans are politically judged as expendable. Can we face such possibilities in the ruling caste? COVID revealed a horrifying example of this. But what if it goes further? One can see this in the continued support for the nuclear complex. For example, for even minimal deployment of this enormous capacity looming above us all to affect all on Earth and probably bring human existence into question. Yet this fact does not lead to greater response, but less response. It leads to numbness and what Radko Mladic called mind-ending. Madeleine Albright once famously said that if a few 100,000 children were lost to sanctions in Iraq, quote, it was worth it, unquote. Well, in some think tank tower, they can figure out how this is so, but it is a lie. It is not worth it in any common sense appraisal, and whoever says this is living out Dr. Strangelove or some other pathological criminal. Madeleine Albright told herself this horror because the truth about what she is engaged in was, and by all appearances, too unpleasant to take responsibility for. She must lie and lie and lie to live with herself. The result was mass murder. Certainly, whole countries have received our lie, and yet we do little to learn from this. Stalin was called the destroyer of nations. This has, in American reflections on responsibility, been the classic feint, to focus on Stalin or Hitler, who revered Stalin, because it is we who have now become this kind of destroyer. Solzhenitsyn spoke of Soviet-Russian society as a society of the lie. This was built by totalitarianism and post-totalitarianism. It was very hard and even perilous to break through, and yet at the same time, Solzhenitsyn suggested, because it was based on a lie, one had only to pierce the fabric of the lie and walk through to the other side, one at a time, to do what Václav Havel would later call, to such great yet puzzling effect, living in truth. The way Solzhenitsyn suggested was to make just a small hole in the veil of the lie, walk through that, and so face the consequences of resting on truth as one would find it. Others would follow, and they would meet on the other side. He was very clear this meant sacrifice, being willing to sacrifice, to be alone and contesting the social lie. This was the only way. Those willing to take the lonely path of finding or teasing out this hole, just as one does with a fabric and its threads, could go through it. Others who followed would widen the hole until eventually everyone could go through. Havel examined this and devised a kind of expression for it. Quote, living in truth, unquote, was to be on the other side. Unfortunately, Havel explored the social form, but could not have imagined its new infinite form, nor was he able to deal with the way institutions that reached out to him, like NATO and the IMF, were the world's harshest practitioners of the lie. The problem with the infinite lie is there appears to be no veil to poke through, no way to find a truth to rest on, and finally, no longer any outside to the lie. Everything is lied about, down to the nature of reality, biology, history, time, and space. No one anymore is permitted to be able to tell truth from falsehood and peddles falsehood precisely because it is the only way to be rewarded.
Thank you, Dana. And know that these are parts of chapters, so you can continue with the lie. Fred goes on with more about the lie. And next I'll have John Malpeed come and read, and John is an extraordinary person, founder of Los Angeles Poverty Department, and a friend of Fred's for a long time, maybe even a comrade. Thank you.
Yeah, wow, that was that last reading was really powerful. I'm going to read. I just opened the book. Well, I'm going to read Two Parties: The Fake Duopoly, because my wife Andrea is from the Netherlands, and she's always ranting about how 2 parties, why not have 30 like in the Netherlands? Which makes sense. Okay. There's nothing which I dread so much as a division of the Republic into 2 great parties, each arranged under its leader and concerting measures in opposition to each other. This, in my humble apprehension, is to be dreaded as the greatest political evil under our Constitution. That's what John Adams said. Not the composer, the early president of the United States. The alternate domination of one faction over another, sharpened by the spirit of revenge, natural to party dissension, which is different in different ages and countries, has perpetrated the most horrid enormities, is itself a frightful despotism. But this leads at length to a more formal and permanent despotism. And that's it's from George Washington, his farewell address, and there's some more which is in italics, but I think it's also from the same spot. The spirit of party serves always to distract the public councils and enfeeble the public administration. It agitates the community with ill-founded jealousies and false alarms, kindles the animosity of one part against another, foments occasionally riot and insurrection. Okay, now we get to Fred himself. The endless fake duopolies. A modern political party is a factory of realities. When here are 2 or more, then there are several factories of realities. The system of dictatorship rests on endless fake battles generated by these products. This is ideally between duopolies, as that is the easiest way to manufacture a complex and thorough lie. Right and left, GOP and Dems, capitalism and communism, these are designed to consume our energy, our minds, and worst of all, our hearts. This is the ingenuous method of rule, and it is far more implacable than, say, dictatorship of a party, or even, in fact, a totalitarian movement ruling through terror. Imagine a world in general held in thrall by a deal made between Truman and Stalin, in which both economies devote enormous resources to the fake battle, all the while remaining a caste order. Imagine 2 opposing presidential candidates whose backers work out a deal in which, like professional wrestling and corrupted sports, victory and loss are effectively rigged. Imagine a scene whereby legions fight endlessly from one side against another, while the true ruling caste and referees are making off with all that matters. This has been the truly evil method of rule since Robert Walpole invented the 2-party system in England to protect the monarchy, the stock jobbers, and budding cartels in 18th century England. The battle of right and left, of course, is dearly held, as is the battle between capitalism and communism. But what if these are distractions from the real fight between the people as a whole, with their governing, their rights, and their safety and happiness against a global ruling caste system which has taken many forms but characterizes the modern era? Whose characteristics can vary widely and whose rule is dependent precisely on this variety, which is hardly only capitalistic in the sense of being about capital, profit, money, and so on. Is not the accumulation of power more universal than that of capital? Stalin ravenously sought to accumulate power, as did Truman, as did J.P. Morgan, as did Beria, as did Pinochet, as did Trotsky, as did Mark Hanna and William McKinley or Martin Van Buren and Andrew Jackson, as did Brezhnev, as did the SPD-CDU in Germany and the Communist Party, actually splitting the country into two implacable fiefdoms that are now unified. The list goes on, as varied and colorful as the spectrum. This fake duopoly system, a caste rule, characterizes modern evil, for it rests on deception, misuse and abuse, exploitation and expropriation, and a kind of extremely cynical and cold bending of minds and hearts. The relentless and extremely diverse propaganda waste the people's energies and assure misery, toil, and potentially even ruin. The long fight between the two systems in the Cold War, for example, was enormously useful for permanent tenure in each bloc, for corruption, for thievery, for misdedication of resources and energy, for keeping the people completely under wraps, caught in their own self-expropriation and depresentation of reality and truth. All the countless little wars fueled each economy and the permanence of two ruling castes. What a great deal for the two parties running the tables. Plagues and viruses beset the people as falsehood stretches to every horizon. What better than to have one falsehood fight another to bitter end, exhausting all the decent people trying to figure out which way is up, and when truth can never be found, but it can be found. And I think I'll stop there.
It is kind of amazing how prescient this writing was from 2020, 21, to see to this point. Thank you, John. And next, I think I'll bring up Nina Salerno, who made the T-shirt that I was wearing, and who's an activist and artist here in Los Angeles, a daily activist, dancing on freeway overpasses against ICE, and making wonderful gestures, important gestures here in the city, and in the spirit of Fred, I think of her. Nina is reading about Goodfellows.
I looked through this and I thought it was really quite relevant to what's going on with this regime. This is at page 92. It's Goodfellas don't respect law, why they appeal to people. Criminality and corruption are rife because the government has been fostering and protecting criminals and fraudsters for its own ends. Racketeering has become the model for much of the ruling caste and is enjoyed as entertainment by people under it. One has only to go back to the deals between the FBI and mafia under J. Edgar Hoover to see this pernicious development. This was then defended by the inevitable use of the Italian mafia in the invasion of Italy by the Allies. And today we find the mafia penetrating and effectively running the healthcare industry in southern Italy, among other things. We find here the fungal proliferation of rackets. In the limited economistic area, a former Fed-compliant manager blew the whistle on Goldman Sachs. And this is her story. You had Goldman Sachs executives, lying, double-speaking, and misrepresenting to regulatory agencies without fear of repercussions. And where I saw Federal Reserve regulators actively working to suppress and expunge from the record evidence of wrongdoing that could be used by regulatory agencies, prosecutors, and even the Federal Reserve itself to hold Goldman Sachs accountable, I had to blow the whistle. We live in a culture where we reward bad behavior. We worship bad behavior, and it's something that needs to stop. Changing the regulatory culture on a U.S. governmental level is something that's going to take a decade, maybe two, and we need to start now before things get worse. This is Carmen Segarra, former Fed employee and whistleblower on Goldman and Fed prosecutors in action, to Robert Scheer, Truthdig, December 18, 2018. The problem is not the administrative state, as the right argues. The problem is lack of governing checks and balances to assure things are honest, fraud doesn't spread, can be seen, addressed, and the public have a space to matter. People need to know what's there, what isn't, and why. If they don't get it, the government needs to go, and that means both parties. McCarthy was doing a job for the Chamber of Commerce and other interests. The left must not have power, and further, political criminality and corruption must be disguised. Reagan, with a clear image as wholesome, was the paragon of corruption and disregard for values. Trump is a full-blown excrescence of this, double-dealing and eager to throw his weight around without bothering with niceties. The left and the people must be crippled. I can see the headline poster now, quote, "Trump to the U.S. people, you're fired." Matt Tierner, 2019 film, Where is My Roy Cohn, illuminates Cohn's role here. This comes from the dirty pool kind of legitimate political world that Roy Cohn personified. Richard Nixon toiled in. And Donald Trump is a kind of delayed reemergence of this dirty pool, transactional type of politics that now really is verging onto a type of fascism that I think has been insipid in our republic for a long time, but has emerged. And the point of the film is that the seeds for this were planted long ago, and Roy Cohn was a major sower of these seeds. Matt Tierner, Where's My Roy Cohn film explores how Joseph McCarthy, ex-aide, mentor Roger Stone, this is from Democracy Now!, January 28th, 2019. Roy Cohn cut his teeth in public life as the junior prosecutor in the Rosenberg spy case, which was an infamous trial of two Jewish Americans, Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, who were accused of and convicted of sharing atomic secrets with the Soviet Union. He is perhaps most famous at age 23 for engaging in a very questionable collusion with the judge, who was Judge Kaufman. And Judge Kaufman, legend has it, would call Roy Cohn, the prosecutor in the case, outside of his synagogue, Park Avenue, New York, to ask Roy Cohn, the junior prosecutor, for guidance on what kind of sentencing he should hand down. That's the end of it.
Thank you, Nina. A great place to end there and to again see its reflection in today's activities. Whew. I mean, I only got my copy of this book a few days ago, so I'm just maybe reeling from its mirroring of today. Will Alexander, the poet in residence here at Beyond Baroque, and also a good friend of Fred's when he was director here and after, is going to read next. Thank you.
Glad you all are here for Fred. And right away, I'm thinking of an anecdote from the life of, doesn't seem to be related, the life of Nikolai Gogol. And you could talk, Gogol never traveled, and Fred would travel some, go from here to Berlin and New York, but he was basically local. And I've mentioned Gogol because anytime you talk to Gogol, he would be in Moscow, but he seemed to know everything about the world. And so Fred was in that area of knowing things about the world. And so I'm just going to read a particle of this essay. It's part of an essay of an essay. It's called James Baldwin's Genius Concerning Responsibility. And there's little notes from this great, interesting Moroccan politician that works with trying to pull the Jewish and the Islamic community together in Morocco. It's Azoulay, and he says the right not to be a perpetrator. And there's a quote from James Baldwin, a rap on race, from a dialogue with Margaret Mead. He says, the crimes of this republic, whether or not I am guilty of them, I am responsible for. You see, I am a human being too, and I have no right to stand in judgment of the world as though I'm not part of it. What I am demanding of other people is what I am demanding of myself. There are other quotes here, but I don't want to just do the quotes, but I'm going to read a particle of this essay. And it's about the situation in Ferguson in 2014 with Michael Brown. For evil deeds to be achieved again and again, James Baldwin argued, the government must have consented to it. There is the real consent for the people were no part of it. The government is responsible for the curse. Baldwin's insight extends ever outward. If there was no assassination, most likely there was government consent. Baldwin understood how to lighten this, to illuminate, increase it with a sense of responsibility, of complicity. He understood what MLK called the infected boil in being covered up, worsened. The only hope was appearance. Again, the people's consent is not the issue. As Mick Jagger vividly nags in Godard's 1+1, where the rehearsal of Symphony for the Devil endlessly repeats the words, placing them in the context of radical struggle. Who killed the Kennedys? It was you and me. This is the devil taunting. For what is what we are meant to think is true? This is what we are told and feel. We did this, but we are not guilty. We are responsible. These are very different. We are responsible if our government murders people whose full humanity does not fit. Baldwin went further. If there were our lynchers, they are part of a category. White people mixed with black and vice versa. There is no such thing as purity in the U.S., perhaps the most genetically mixed population in the history of the planet. The genes of killers mix with the genes of the killed. The genes of slavers mix with the genes of the slaves. All are bound. Baldwin flipped things around to say if horrible things were happening, it was not merely on the government's watch, but that the government was okay with it. This is to name the unspeakable. Trappist monk and activist Thomas Merton figured this out in the 60s. He coined the term the unspeakable. During the nuclear madness of the Cold War to describe a vacuum of void of compassion and responsibility. Some think he too paid for his life. 6 deaths, all involving men with connection to the August 2014 protest in Ferguson, Missouri, drew attention on social media and speculation in the activist community that something sinister was at play. Cars torched, bodies riddled with bullets. In 2018, 24-year-old Danny Jones was found hanging from a tree in the yard of his North St. Louis County home by his mother, Melissa McKinney, also active in Ferguson. She pointed out on Facebook after her son's death, "They lynched my baby." U.S. News and World Report, March 17, 2019. McKinney thought Danny was being paranoid when he would come and he would say, "Mama, we need to get protection. They're out to get us." 2 weeks prior to Danny's death, McKinney describes how a caravan of what she believed were undercover cops, some in bogus military company in vehicles, repeatedly circled her block, eventually parking on her street. Several dressed in black police T-shirts got out and lined up in front of her home, just standing there, staring at the house. It's from the crisis, NAACP. No date assessed, January 24th, 2022. 2021, excuse me. Further, my husband, who is ex-military, and my brother both carefully examined the knots in the sheet, which they described as intricate Navy knots, something Danny would never have known how to tie since he was never in the military or even the Boy Scouts, says McKinney. If you were going to kill yourself, would you create these challenging knots? Plus, it was not a sheet from our home, says McKinney. The crisis in NAACP, no date assessed. It says 2021. Jones' death was ruled by local police a suicide. The torching deaths, homicides. On September 6, 2016, Darren Seals, a leader in the Ferguson protest, was found shot and killed inside a burning car. Or similarly to DeAndre Joshua, he was 29 years old. Both died in a torched car after being shot. Since 2014 shooting, about 6 people connected to the protest following Brown's death have died, some in violent, mysterious ways. The Associated Press reports, while police said there is no evidence that foul play was involved in the men's death, those within the community report feeling as if they were on pins and needles. Reverend Darrell Gray said the prominent African-American leader said that he received anonymous threats, and he recently found an unmarked box containing a 6-foot python in his car. Most recently, Basim Masari, was 31, was found unresponsive on a bus in November 2018 and was pronounced dead. A toxicology report revealed he had had a heart attack following a fentanyl overdose. Masari was well known in the community for his live streaming and participating in the Ferguson protest, telling an interviewer in 2014 he did so because he believed the mainstream media ain't gonna say the truth about Brown's death. They ain't gonna never say the truth. They got their own narrative. That's in the Rolling Stone. I'll just read just one more fragment. In November 2014, DeAndre Joshua, 20, was found shot in the head inside a torched car weeks after a jury declined to charge officers Darren Wilson with the fatal shooting of Michael Brown. 29-year-old Darren Seals, a friend of the Brown family, was also found shot inside a burned car 2 weeks later. Ferguson activist Marshawn McCarroll, 23, of Columbus, Ohio, reportedly shot himself outside the Ohio State House in February 2016. 27-year-old Edward Crawford, who was photographed throwing a flaming tear gas canister back at the police during a Ferguson protest, reportedly shot himself May 2017. Danny Jones was found hanging from a tree in the family's backyard by his mother on the morning of April 7th, 2018. In November 2018, Basim Masari, a 31-year-old Palestinian American who supported the Ferguson protest by live streaming them on social media, was found dead on a bus of an apparent heart attack. Toxicology results released in February 2019 reported a fentanyl overdose. Suspicious always. And Fred had his, I'll stop there, but Fred always had his pulse on the meter. And we have a very wobbly meter today. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Will. We do have a wobbly meter, that's for sure. I'd like to invite Fred's niece, up to read. Claire? Grace. Oh my God, I don't know why I said Claire. Grace was very close with Fred, and I know he loved you enormously. And I welcome you to read a passage of your choice. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here. This is wonderful. I'm going to be reading from The Age of No Consent. I got the book like an hour ago, so wish me luck. But we must first deal, and I'm not starting in the beginning, but we must first deal with this consent problem. What we have is surely not consent. Contrary to the claim of a few writers and intellectuals, consent cannot be made up or fabricated or manufactured. If it is, it obviously cannot be consent. It is propaganda, organization, force, violence, and domination by the lie. And that is what we have in America, a society of the lie, and no longer a society of consent. Governing consent has been replaced by governing lie. All right, now skipping ahead a little. I have never consented to a third sin, not original, but conceived in the fiendish minds of a ruling caste, to merge removal and enslavement, and so produce the strut of rule modernization. Ask our workers and impoverished and soldiers forced to bow every day in misery to the new combined degradation of enslavement and genocide. Ask the people what it means to hold second, third, even fourth class status in every area. How do you think that feels? This is surely not consent, and it could never be. How many untouchables must there be? Does it merely move from one group to the next in an endless correction as the dead bodies pile on and on? I did not consent to the 3/5 of a person for anyone, for it to be imposed on anyone. I did not consent to the turn of supremacies of every kind, this infection of society by a full spectrum dominance, shorthand for violence, deception, thoughtlessness, expansion, and no refuge or protection for anyone. Of those in the military and government sworn to uphold the Constitution, the decimation of consent is a strange thing indeed to defend. Where is the common sense in this? How could one defend this? How does such a thing conform to any founding tradition of the councils of the people? It is alien, it is foreign and hostile to everything human and real. It is the Confederacy and Indian removal policies merged in empire. Under such convergence, we all have become 3/5 of a person first, and hardly just those here, but abroad, overthrown, subjugated, and erased as obstacles to a glittering planetary lie. I did not consent to this convergence of what Martin Luther King Jr. called I did not consent to this convergence of what Martin Luther King called, assuring his murder, the triplet evils of racism, materialism, and militarism. But I am responsible for my part in it. I did not consent to an implacable, unbending, immovable tyranny of political and economic cartels and their caste society, working day and night in every nook and cranny to assure public life cannot arise among the people to rival, challenge, and end these outrageous crimes. But I am responsible in my part for it. I did not consent to holding and obscuring the result, the destruction of all that matters in events, deeds, words, or people, and any and all people, any and all events, any and all deeds, any and all words. In black lives, deeds, and words, in white and yellow and pink lives, deeds, and words. I did not consent to mattering in any realm. I did not consent to being told every day of my life, from childhood and early schooling on, that I and others do not matter enough to, in adulthood, govern all our conditions. Being told such things were not my concern. Accepting a buffet table of prospects born of a glittering lie throughout the world, I did not consent to this empire Mark Twain called so long ago the United States of Lyncherdom. But I am responsible in my part for it. This is my concern, that I was taught from birth that there is no difference in how people in this republic were treated. I was taught that we as a country did not have major work to do to make democracy and republic real, or that our history was anything other than a whitewashed ivory disgusting farce of rascals, rapscallions, and ruin. From the whites of our eyes to the White House, white, white, and more white, to every horizon, is soothing music. It is soothing music for fools and madmen. And I have, in no uncertain terms, been a fool and been driven, like many, mad. I did not consent to the rule of race, money, gender, or party. I did not consent to the undermining of plural rights of all who inhabit this continent. But I am responsible in my part for it. To say there is consent, manufactured or otherwise, is to completely ignore the political. This is the use of power against the people. All of us who undergird and infuse with our life all systems that undo, divide, and destroy self-government and the inalienable right to have rights, to have and enjoy political freedom that comes from our government, that comes only from our governing of our conditions. To say there was consent to this is cruel, absurd, and a lie. It is to demean and disappear those countless ones who fought to protect the Republic, yet could not overturn the implacable power supremacy the parties and cartels have garnered. Throughout all this, however, the truth is that the tradition of supremacies cannot stand anywhere as tall as its eternal opponent. For the largest, most meaningful, pure, righteous tradition is one that began with our founding compacts and their ever-renewed and expanding meaning. I did not consent to violate this tradition, to twisting its meaning, to persecution, oppression, and murder. But I am responsible, surely, for my part and how I rank, and how this rank distortion is permitted to endure and mutates by the year, bearing people's long struggle for freedom and self-governance. I did not consent to the crushing of the revolutionary spirit of the people in whole or in part, nor the suspension of their rights in whole or in part. Who did, who would? Deal, Malcolm X said. But we did not. Instead, we allowed him to be murdered. Thanks.
Thank you, Grace, so much. I think I've gone through everyone except myself, and, right? Yeah. So I'm going to read something very briefly, and I'm reading from this section called The Great Chorus. And as Will mentioned, there are so many quotes in the book, and I'm actually going to read a few of them because I think for me it shows how collecting other people's thoughts, other people's words, was a way to re-speak and to include and collaborate with others and those that came before him. So I chose just a couple of things, a couple of passages from this section. And, you know, just to say, in the editors mentioned how Hannah Arendt remarked how Walter Benjamin's preference for listing quotes rather than burying them into the text once grew into a 600-page manuscript. And I like that remark, and here are just a few things that Fred chose. Yeah. Forced choice is not consent. We aren't consenting. That lack of consent matters. We need to realize we matter. There seems to be nothing they can do that results in them facing a serious consequence, whereas the smallest infractions of our lives that can even be civil rather than criminal are instantly crystallized and memorialized at the moment of mistake and captured in a permanent record. Everyone is asking, click OK to continue. Right now, I'm done clicking. And that's Ed Snowden, February 24th, 2021. Are fleets and armies necessary to a work of love and reconciliation? Let us not deceive ourselves, sir. These are the implements of war and subjugation, the last arguments to which kings resort. I ask, gentlemen, sir, what means this martial array if its purpose be not to force us to submission? Patrick Henry, delivered to the Convention of Delegates, Richmond, Virginia, in 1775. And then a couple of others. It is much easier to find something already identified. In particular, it becomes much harder to find something one isn't looking for. Chance encounters leading down unknown paths have been exceedingly hard to experience. How many truly ambitious ideas have gone untried because of the internalization of so many codes of behavior? How many deeper and significant shifts have been thwarted under categories that do not serve our interests, our truly common sense? Amiel Al-Khaleh, A Bibliography for After Jews and Arabs, 2021. We're an empire now, and when we act, we create our own reality. We're history's actors, and you, all of you, will be left to just study what we do. Ron Suskind, quoting anonymous White House advisor, 2004. And then, oh wait, okay, here's one. All right. Okay. What we have got, we've got 4 or 5 people on social media speaking truth to 300 million people. These candidates, Hillary and Trump, are vile. They're vile. And you have the American people fighting about which one is going to be better. It's insane. This country has gone cuckoo birds, kooky birds, doozy bot nuts. And if you try to talk about what we're facing, the reality, you're the crazy one. We're a nation of cowards. We don't even know how to stand up to people who abuse us. We've been so cowed. We have a huge day of reckoning coming. I'm not going to talk about happy horse shit, that there's going to be some kind of kumbaya moment, but we can change the narratives. That's our power. Debbie Lusignan, Sane Progressive, October 8th, 2016. Rights aren't rights if someone can take them away. They're privileges. That's all we've ever had in this country. It's a bill of temporary privileges. And if you read the news, even badly, you know that every year the list gets shorter and shorter. Sooner or later, the people in this country are going to realize the government does not give a fuck about them. The government doesn't care about you or your children or your rights or your welfare or your safety. It simply does not give a fuck about you. It's interested in its own power. That's the only thing, keeping it and expanding it wherever possible. And that's George Carlin. And the last little bit I'm reading is not a quote. This is from Fred. I have been around poetry intensely now since I was in my mid-30s, and fortunately took on running a poetry center in Los Angeles. I am so grateful for this, And though I did this for other reasons, having mainly to do with public space and exercising its possibility, I was around it so long that now I can find poems I like and that feed me. I had to spend thousands of hours listening and putting forward poems to reach this glorious state. Frankly, not until years could overcome my own training. I am hardly more deaf than most. But this is what it took to show me the power of this activity in a society that has generated so many amazing poets and poems that it takes the breath away. I had to spend a decade and a half and then grappling with this for years after to overcome my being taught that poetry is incomprehensible, that it is specialized and work, that is something only a few could ever grasp, that only those who take on its work have this to teach. Why did it take me so long? And why are poets not honored with street names in every town, with grand boulevards named after the courageous ones, with poetry's infamy and scandal and revelation a part of every breakfast conversation? Thank you all for being here. The book is in the bookstore, and there are many spirits here tonight that couldn't join us, including Chris Krause and Amy Shoulder, and I think, just a lot of people who I think would find this dear. So thank you.